Program Bachelor of Arts, FIBA, Subject Economics, Semester 1, Course Code ECC101, Course Title Microeconomics 1. Unit 3 Consumer Theory, Module Name Income and Substitution Effects. Myself, Ms. Anthea Dias. Outline of the module: income effect and substitution effect for normal goods, and income effect and substitution effect for inferior goods. Learning outcomes: the student will be able to evaluate the income and substitution effects for normal goods and explain the income and substitution effects for inferior goods. First, we'll understand the concept of income and substitution effects in general. Now, when there is a fall in the price of a commodity, it has two effects. The first one is consumer will tend to buy more of that commodity because now it has become more cheaper due to the fall in price. And they will buy less of the other commodity which is now quite expensive. This response to a change in the price of a good is called as substitution effect. And the second effect is, because one of the commodities is become cheaper, the consumer is having more purchasing power in hand. They are better off because now they can buy the same amount of commodity but for lesser money due to the fall in the price. And so the person has got more money to purchase other commodities. This is called as the income effect. To be noted out here is that income effect does not imply that there is an increase in your actual income. It is basically increase in your real income because of the fall in price, your purchasing power has increased. Now, what are the income and substitution effects for normal goods? Now, this is explained with the help of a diagram. Now, you can see in this diagram, we have clothing which is plotted on the y-axis, and you have food which is plotted on the x-axis. All you need first is your budget line, which is RS. This is your initial budget line, which is showing you the combination of two commodities, that is clothing and food, that can be purchased by an individual with a given income. Now suppose the price of food falls, okay? Because price of food has fallen, the budget line is rotating outwards. So you can see the new budget line, the red dotted line, that is your new budget line RT. Why this budget line has shifted or has rotated outward? It is because of the fall in the price of food, and food is measured on the horizontal axis. So we have the indifference curve which is shown by U1. This is the indifference curve U1. Indifference curve tells you the utility that a consumer receives after consuming these two commodities, that is clothing and food. So on this indifference curve, we first mark point A. Okay, consumer receives utility at this point A, where the indifference curve U1 is tangential to the budget line RS. Now at point A, you see the consumer is purchasing F1 amount of food and C1 amount of clothing. That is at point A. Now because the price of food has fallen, we got the new budget line, that is RT, and the new indifference curve will be UT. U2. Okay, and the equilibrium point for a consumer will be point B. And here he is consuming F2 amount of food and C2 amount of clothing at point B. So now you see that a consumer is better off because now he's on a higher indifference curve. And if you recollect the properties of indifference curve, higher the indifference curve, higher is the satisfaction of the consumer. This has all happened because the price of food has fallen, and so the consumer has got maximum utility on indifference curve U2, that is at point B. So he is consuming now more of food, that is F2, and less of clothing, that is C2. Now to find out these two effects, that is the substitution effect and the income effect, we need to draw a hypothetical budget line. Okay, and this imaginary budget line is shown, it's a black line which is passing through the old indifference curve U1. You see the black line, so I am drawing the same one, this budget line. I have drawn a hypothetical budget line, that is the black line in the diagram. Now you see this hypothetical or the imaginary budget line is tangential to the old indifference curve, that is U1, and also it is parallel to the new budget line. Okay, the imaginary budget line, that is the black line, is parallel to your new budget line, that is RT, the dotted red line. Okay, so you have to draw that line in such a way that it is parallel and it is tangential to the indifference curve U1. So accordingly, you get a point there, point B, D I've marked it, and we mark it as E. So now what is the total effect? The total effect is, there are three effects which I'm going to explain to you here. The total effect. The total effect is the change in consumption of food because the price of food has fallen, and the total effect is F1 to F2. Okay, consumption of food has increased. Now, this total effect we have to divide between the two, substitution effect and income effect. The substitution effect is shown from F1 to E, and the income effect is shown from E to F2. Okay, so F1E is your substitution effect because you have substituted clothing for food because food is become cheaper, and E to F2 is your income effect. So you have got more income because your purchasing power has increased because the price of food has fallen, and that is why you are consuming more of food. So these are the two effects, that is substitution effect and the income effect under your total effects. Now similar for income and substitution effects for inferior commodities. Now what are inferior commodities? They are basically those goods where as your income increases, you buy less of those goods. That is why you call them as inferior goods. Now here you have to keep in mind that the income effect for inferior goods is negative because you are buying less of it as your income is increasing. So again, this is being shown with the help of a diagram. The diagram is the same like we have seen in the previous one. The only difference out here is you see your point B, it is shifted backwards. Okay, so I will explain to you once again the same diagram it is, only slight changes with respect to your point B. So again we have clothing on your y-axis and you have food on your x-axis. Okay, we have the budget line RT and you have your indifference curve U1. You have point A where a consumer initially is buying C1 and F1 amount of food, which we have already seen. Okay, now we have to draw a new budget line, that is the dotted budget line which you see in the diagram. That is your RT budget line. This is RS and this is RT. Okay, now on this new budget line you have to draw the indifference curve also, which is U2, and you have your utility maximizing position, that is at point B, that you mark it as E. And now again you have to draw the imaginary budget line, which is again parallel to the new budget line, and it is tangential to your old indifference curve. Okay, so I'm drawing that imaginary line, that is the black line in the diagram that you can see. So we mark it as point D here, and this is F2. Now what is it indicating? Now here again our total effect is from F1 to F2 because the price of food has fallen. But now, as I have told you, inferior goods are those goods whose consumption falls because your income is increasing. But here in this situation it is different. Why? If you see the substitution effect, which is shown from F1E, and the income effect, which is from E to F2, all you have to see is the distance or the gap between the two. This gap between F1E is greater than EF2, which means that the substitution effect is stronger than the income effect. So even in case of inferior commodities, in this case, since the substitution effect is greater than your income effect, consumers will buy more of food when the price of food has fallen, even though the food is the inferior commodity. Why? Because substitution effect is greater or stronger than the income effect. So this is with regards to your inferior commodities. So in conclusion, you have to know two things here: what are normal goods and what are inferior goods, and what is income effect and what is substitution effect. So a normal good is a good whose, as your income increases, you buy more of that good, and inferior good is just the opposite. So as your income increases, you buy less of that commodity. Now, income effect is positive for normal goods and it is negative for your inferior goods. Whereas substitution effect implies the change in consumption of a commodity because of the change in price. In our examples, it was the price of food which was decreased, and so consumers will tend to buy more of food and less of clothing. So that is the substitution effect. So for further reference, you can refer to Robert Pindiak, Microeconomics 8th edition. Thank you.